There's always hope that this war will be finished and the victory will be on Ukrainian side. But in order to make this war to be shorter, we need to support Ukraine by all means, not only militarily, but also politically, economically, financially, because Ukrainian economy is suffering huge drop of activity. 30% decrease of GDP means a lot, and of course in such a situation it's very difficult to balance the finances. But Lithuania is very dedicated and supportive to Ukraine. We started it to do even before the war broke out with our Stingers. Then we provided other kind of military equipment. We are ready to train the Ukrainian soldiers. We repaired the damaged equipment coming from Ukraine. But of course, it's not a bilateral issue. This is an issue we all have to be together, to stand together in order to support Ukraine. And sometimes decisions come, but decisions come a little bit too late. And you mentioned about the costs. Yeah. Every day of this war means huge costs. First of all, in Ukraine, human lives, destruction of civil infrastructure, economy, and our suffering of Western societies has nothing to do with the kind of suffering Ukrainian people face. So this is the reason why we should be even more committed, more decisive to support Ukraine.
Well, Russia has been waging a very aggressive drone campaign, drone attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure, critical energy infrastructure. What can Ukraine do to fight back? And is just fighting back and resisting those attacks coming from Russia going to be sufficient for them to actually win this war?
First of all, Ukraine needs effective air defense system. And my colleague Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, called many times, please send us air defense systems in order we are able to fight in the air. And so far, unfortunately, the support was not sufficient enough. And now
recently
we have the decisions, recent decisions.
The UK Prime Minister announced the supply of tanks.
Yes, and United States support, of course, very important too. And now they need tanks. Also critically need the tanks because of the war in the eastern part of Ukraine. So this is an area we have to be very fast. Our decision making must be very smooth, and we can help them. And of course, we try to do our best in order to restore this damaged energy infrastructure in Ukraine, and we are sending from Lithuania our equipment. They need energy generators, disconnectors, all kind of energy system infrastructure elements, and we have to provide them with those elements too. But this still does not solve the issue. How long will be this war? And I think we have to push Russia even more by sanctions. Sanctions have some impact on Russian economy. Sometimes our expectations are higher than real result, but it does not mean that sanctions are not effective. They are effective, but with certain time lag. And now Russian economy already feels the pain. But in order to create the motivation in Russian society, of course, the success of Ukrainian armed forces in the battlefields are just critically important.
Yeah, well, I know you were in Kyiv recently with your counterpart, Polish counterpart, President Duda, who just spoke to a colleague of mine, and there's this so-called Lublin Triangle, and you've talked at length about the support you have. You would actually endorse Ukraine becoming a member, not just of the EU, but NATO as well.
Yes.
Should Ukraine become a member of NATO, would that not bring the conflict to a much more dangerous, escalatory level?
Of course, it would be very difficult to achieve full-fledged membership of Ukraine in NATO in the midst of this crisis. But we are talking not about the full-fledged membership right now. We are talking about clear timetable or clear plan. and just stop to repeat those sentences we used to do all the time since the Bucharest summit in 2008. The doors for NATO membership are open for everybody. Ukrainians ask us, okay, the doors are open, but we cannot find those doors. Where they are? And this is the reason why we have to find some guarantees, security guarantees for Ukraine not being the member of NATO. This is not so easy to do, but I think this is one of the tasks and one of the objectives of NATO summit, which will take place, as you know, on July 10th to 12th in Vilnius, in capital of Lithuania.
Being a part of NATO yourselves, Lithuania, do you feel sufficiently protected?
We feel sufficiently protected, but it doesn't mean that we have not do our homework. And we do a lot. We try to modernize our army, armed forces. We try to spend more on defense. We already achieved the figure of 2.5% of GDP. We are ready to increase it up to 3% of GDP in coming years. And this is the reason why we are seeking for very bold and decisive decisions in Vilnius summit, because we already took some good measures and good decisions in Madrid summit, which took place last year. But some sentences, they are at the level of declarations, and declarations have to be implemented, because otherwise they are just declarations. So this is the reason why we are expecting regional defense plans approved. We are expecting the decisions regarding air defense systems in eastern flank of NATO. So far they are also at the level of declarations. And also we expect that there will be some signals of political cooperation with Ukraine, which will be sent to Ukraine.
How important is the US's role in Ukraine's fight for democracy here?
It's absolutely critically important, and I always am very strong proponent of transatlantic bond. And in those cases, as we speak, correctly speak about autonomy, military autonomy in Europe, it doesn't mean that Europe has to compete with United States or with transatlantic bond. All the efforts we put here in Europe in order to be more autonomous in military field are complementary to the NATO, because NATO is the most important factor of our collective security.
Is there some concern that now with the change in the composition of the U.S. House, it's leaning towards Republican, that perhaps some of the U.S.'s military commitment may be dialed back?
I look first of all at the decisions. If I see the decisive decisions made by United States government, it's okay. It means that United States are supportive to Ukraine, and I do not see any signs of possible relaxation or some change of attitude in this regard.
And final, just one question. Lithuania has one of the highest inflation rates in all of the Eurozone, around 20 percentage points. How long is that sustainable, and how long can the public be willing to tolerate those levels of high levels of inflation? Okay,
we understand very well that inflation means challenge for our households, but we try to compensate by increasing the pensions, by increasing social benefits, and the average salaries grow in the country by quite long time, by 10, 12, even 20%. Now we see some stabilization of real incomes because of high inflation, but I don't think that inflation will be very long-term phenomenon, and probably it will be just transitional period we have to deal with, and we already announced the plan how we will compensate the growth of our energy prices in the country, and we started to implement this plan.